I would like to share some thoughts on this thing I call full circle. And let's dive right in. It consists of 3 elements, and after a quick general introduction and thoughts, I will go into each of these elements and describe what they mean in that context. We probably know this curve, or oversaturated with this curve, but at the same time, it cannot be overstated how important it is to understand what this means. And this graphic helps me in getting a little grasp on the enormity that exponential growth actually adds to the potential of what we can do. So if you imagine a doubling of something like compute over a period of time like 10 years, then this is what the potential, meaning these circles, is what the potential of that growth means. And as you can see, with the next doubling, the radius would be enormous and goes out of bounds. So this is something that we cannot really fathom as humans yet. Not many people have an intuition for this. This is why many experts fall prey to the illusion that at any point in that curve, they will move on, or the development will move on linearly, where it will still continue exponentially. And the reason why most experts think that is that any technologically based exponential curve is not one technology that's growing exponentially, but it's a stack of independent technologies that build upon each other and become that exponential power that we see. So in terms of compute, for example, this would mean Charles Babbage and Ada Lovelace building mechanical computers. They come to an end, we move on with tubes. They come to an end, we move on with transistors. They come to an end, and we move on with something else. And we'll see what that is. Currently, it could be something in the field of quantum. In the beginning of any of these exponential curves, it looks very disappointing. This is what I call the linear superiority illusion. It looks like the linear extrapolation is much superior to the exponential extrapolation, which means that we're more likely to believe what the linear extrapolation tells us, because that is more successful for a while until the curve breaks through the linear projection. And the reason why we do this is because we have not really learned to think in systems. Yes, we've learned about lean, which is basically the cybernetic feedback loop. But to really deeply think in systems that we engage in every day would help us to understand what is going on in exponentials. And this is what full circle is about. Full circle is one such cybernetic feedback loop. And the first element is what I call deep alignment. It's about feeling and thinking and centering. Why is this important? This is important because on the one hand, we've added enormous power and possibility to our tool set as humans in the last century. So essentially now we can either create enormous abundance, or we can simply destroy the planet and the human race. And we haven't managed to match that with the same type of godlike wisdom and love. And if we don't do that, I believe things will go horribly wrong. And there's an interesting story to be learned from history. In the early 19th century, it was clear that some major change was about to happen. And the major change was the emergence of democracies. But nobody knew what it was going to be. Nobody knew how that change was to be navigated. And in the circles, in the salons around Goethe, for example, in Germany, an idea emerged of giving young people the opportunity to focus and ground themselves and center themselves in what we now today would call a meditation retreat. This idea wasn't implemented in Germany, but it was implemented in Denmark. And from Denmark it went to Norway and to Finland and Sweden. And the whole story is described in the book Nordic Secret. And the current situation, the current positive situation we can see in the Nordic countries is attributed in that book to that. And I can follow every single argument of that. So one of the things that are happening in that deep alignment level is a personal development course, a book that's in the making about the tools that people can use to ground themselves, to center themselves continuously. This is not a one-off thing. And something we came up with as a recipe at talltalk.io, recipe for having a really meaningful and deep dinner conversation. And you just go to Tall Talk and just read it and do it. Okay, so that's about deep alignment. Once we know we're deeply aligned, once we know where we stand, once we can match the powers we have with wisdom, we can move on to the next level, which is about the future. It's about future actualization. It's about dreaming up the future. The most courageous act probably is dreaming up the future. About sharing that, putting into a story, moving people, creating emotions. Any navigation of an uncertain future moves through three distinct phases. And this is why it's so important to create an image that people want to aspire towards. First, we have no idea what's going on. That's the mystic phase. We're doing research and development. Then we move on into the heuristics phase. We have rough ideas of how things work. In the algorithmic phase, we can put an organization around it and scale it up. And this is what any change has to go through. And in order to be able to navigate the enormous space and enormous challenge, enormous opportunities we have, we need to understand where we're going. My little attempt to understand this is a book I wrote in 2019, I call Mother, to understand more about how I believe the world can be organized. But building on Winston Churchill's article 50 Years Hence from 1932, we also created a project called 50yearshence.org, in which people contribute towards what we call unbook. So it's a shared book, it's a collaborative book, which is only shared among the authors. That creates a safe space to think about the future in 50 years. The current version, 50 Years Hence 2070, will be published very soon. We're currently at 200 pages, and I really look forward to reading that. And what I also look forward is the unconference we are going to do with the participants, with the authors, in the summer of this year. Once we know where we want to go, we have to move there. We have to build the stuff that actually builds that future before we go back into understanding where we stand and doing deep alignment. One such thing is what we do at delodi. We build software based on the assumption that everything will be connected through software at one point. And that software cannot only be technologically stable and sound and of integrity, but it has to be of moral and ethical integrity as well. This is what we do. We do this with clients and for our own projects. What we do with Jungle is we help teams and organizations navigate complexity. It's a tactical toolkit for your next step in navigating the enormous complexity that we're faced with. And with Catapult Now, we have a network and think tank to combine the power from the industry with the required impact in the world, in the field. And there's a program coming out in 2020 that is too early yet to talk about. And Full Circle sums all of that up in conversations. 3 types of conversations. One-to-one recorded conversations that are published. Group conversations of 5 to 8 people around specific topics of the future that concern the future. And open and public fishbowl formats that we will be starting rolling out once it's warm enough in Europe. Okay, with that I can conclude. Thank you so much for coming all the way here.